Hey guys, tonight we slip into a velvet-trimmed nightmare, your own royal wedding. The air smells of wax and rosemary. Harp strings hum in the corner. You're 6, not 16. Not even close. Your gown scratches your arms, your crown feels like it's pressing your skull down into your spine. This era has a funny way of eating up girls like you young, royal, and useful. You're officially Queen of England now, but don't let the title fool you. You're more a bargaining chip than monarch. And somewhere to your left stands your new husband, 29 years, old with a beard, armor, and a sword that's already been used in battle. Lucky you. This isn't a fairy tale. You're Margaret of France, youngest daughter of a powerful king. Historians still argue whether he treated you more like a daughter or a political asset. After all, he was busy fighting wars, raising grown children from his first marriage, and ruling a kingdom. But still, he went through with this marriage, signed the treaty, said the vows, took your hand, and history never blinked. And today, you're being married off to Edward I of England, a man nearly 5 times your age. You're told to smile. The archbishop anoints your forehead. The ring slides over your tiny knuckle. There's feasting after, but you can barely keep your eyes open. Some adult laughs when you fall asleep with a sweetmeat in your hand. His first wife, Eleanor of Castile, died 2 years ago. But he needs a new queen, and more importantly, a diplomatic alliance with France. So, congratulations. You're a contract in a child's body. The ceremony is magnificent trumpets, Latin vows you don't understand, a crowd full of nobles pretending this is normal. You probably won't survive this, by the way. Not emotionally, and maybe not even physically. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you rewatching for Mand, what time it is right now for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The wedding ends, and you're ushered back to your chambers tired, overwhelmed, and already part of international politics. People bow to you, but none of them talk to you like a real child. You're not even allowed to play with toys in public anymore. It's unbecoming of a queen. The records show Edward was kind to you in his way. You're Queen of England now, but don't get too excited. Can't read yet. You need a step stool to climb onto your own horse. Even with a crown on your head, you don't get to choose the color of your dresses, or when you go to bed. The maids curtsy, but they also tug your arms too hard when dressing you. Even your favorite nursemaid bows before speaking. It's like being the most powerful doll in a kingdom-sized dollhouse. Edward, your husband? Yes? That word still makes your stomach twisties. Too busy conquering whales and flexing his muscles to spend much time with you. In fact, months go by without him even visiting your chamber. Some say he doesn't want to spook you. Others suggest he just doesn't care. You don't even know you've stepped into it yet. Historians still debate whether he truly respected your youth or just postponed his duties because he had enough heirs already. And while you're technically crowned, you're not in control of anything. You don't sit in councils or sign laws. You sit still for portraits. A stern governess catches you and scolds you for being childish. That same day, you're ordered to sit through a 4-hour religious lecture in Latin. You understand none of it, but you nod solemnly, because queens don't pout. You learn courtly manners, how to hold a goblet correctly, and how to smile without showing too much teeth. And when you're not doing that, you're being paraded like a very small trophy. It's never forgotten, but never quite remembered for anything of your own. One day a pigeon lands in the window of your solar. You're enchanted, you name it. Try to feed it crumbs. The court is full of foreign tongues, velvet-clad men with oily mustaches, and noble women with sharp eyes and sharper gossip. You begin to sense that no one trusts anyone, and everyone is watching you closely, waiting for the day you grow old enough to matter more or less. There's something oddly terrifying about being honored and ignored at the same time. You exist on the edge of history. That's the trap. It's not long before you realize you are not the only woman in the king's life, not by a long shot. While you're learning to embroider daisies and balance books on your head, the real star of court is a woman twice your age, dripping in pearls and sly smiles. She touches his arm in front of everyone. She laughs at his jokes like she's done it for years. You watch from your cushioned chair, barely tall enough for your feet to reach the ground, as courtiers bow to her just as deeply as they do to you. Her name, Eleanor de Bar, or maybe Alice de Lusignan. Depends on the rumor mill. One thing's for certain, she's not you. She doesn't flinch when the king enters the room. Some say Edward still mourns his first wife, Eleanor of Castile, and this is just a passing distraction. Your queen, yes, but it's someone else's voice echoing in the royal bedchamber. Others whisper he never truly let go of his old favorites. Historians still argue whether these relationships were romantic, political, or simply convenient, but it hardly matters when you're the one sitting quietly on the sidelines. At meals, the mistress is seated just a few chairs away. She wears emeralds. You wear a stiff smile. No one says anything outright. Of course, this is royal life, where everything ugly is hidden beneath silk and ceremony. And you wonder not for the first time if he's even thought about your name today. But even at 6 or 7 years old, you can sense it. This court doesn't revolve around you. It says he's very fond of you, in that voice adults use when trying not to lie. You're part of the furniture, a fragile porcelain fixture in someone else's story. Once, during a feast, a minstrel sings a ballad about a love so pure it survives death. Everyone claps. The king wipes a tear. You try to ask a laddie-in-waiting if the king is angry with you. She hesitates. And so you continue learning your court dances, memorizing lines from the Psalms, and pretending you don't notice how many times the king dines elsewhere. By the time you're 8, you've started to notice that being queen means you're surrounded by people who smile too much and tell you almost nothing. Tutors teach you Latin, but never explain why you're relearning the same phrases over and over again, mostly ones about obedience and silence. You memorize them anyway, safer that way. That she is you. You don't react. You've learned not to flinch. But the words settle deep in your chest, sticky and uncomfortable. The court, meanwhile, is a hive of whispers. Hear names traded like playing cards, declare de Bohun, Mortimer. Allies one day, traitors the next. Everyone's angling for something. Gold, power, land. You stay. You curtsy. You smile. You endure. And every once in a while, someone gets sent away and no one talks about it again. Just a new face at supper and fewer footsteps in the halls at night. One evening, you overhear something. Servant murmuring too close to a tapestry. She's just a puppet. The French king holds the strings. Historians still argue whether Edward's court was especially treacherous or simply standard for the era. Either way, you can feel it in your bones. Every smile hides a motive. You learn to nod like you understand more than you do. You'll laugh when others laugh, even if you don't get the joke. You don't cry anymore. That lesson was learned early and hard. You sit by the window, tracing frost with your fingertip, and imagine what it would be like to just run. Even the sweet old bishop who teaches you about the saints always seems to know a little too much about who's been visiting your husband's chamber. You start paying attention in new ways. Who speaks to whom? Who looks nervous before a royal audience? Who won't meet your eyes? The courier once brings word from your homeland, France. You're thrilled. A taste of home. But the letter isn't for you. It's for the king. You never find out what it said. Some days, your only peace comes in the morning. When the court is still asleep and the sun hasn't yet hit the stained glass, but you don't. Winter deepens in the palace, and the stone walls do little to keep the cold out. You're 9 now, and the chill settles into your bones like a second skin. Lie in a vast bed alone, dwarfed by embroidered pillows and brocade curtains. There are no bedtime stories, and you're grateful for that, even if you don't understand why. It's as though your presence reminds them of something they'd rather forget that. A child sits on England's throne beside a man old enough to be her father. No whispered goodnights. Sometimes a maid dozes in the corner, but most nights it's just the wind and your own breathing. The king? He's off against some campaign in the north, or brokering another treaty. Maybe he's with one of the other women, or maybe he's just avoiding you. Others say he only married you to keep the peace with France and never saw you as a real partner. But when you sit up, the room is empty. Just the wind in the chimney and the rustle of tapestries. You sink back into the pillows, cold despite the velvet. Whatever the truth, the space between you is measured not in years, but in silence. Fur-lined robes help, but they itch your neck. Fires crackle in the hearths, but they're more for show than warmth. He asks about your studies, offers you fruit from his plate, pats your head like a pet spaniel. You nod and thank him. She tells you of hawking trips and poetry contests, of silks dyed in colors you can barely imagine. You clutch those letters like lifelines. They remind you of something softer, something warmer. You're excellent at that, now thanking people for things you never asked for. Still, it's not the cold that bothers you most. It's the quiet. Nights stretch on forever. No one really explains what's supposed to happen between a husband and wife. You only know that nothing does. Not yet. What you do know is that court talk changes when you're around. People lower their voices. They glance sideways before speaking. Historians still argue whether Edward had genuine affection for you or simply respected your age too much to engage. Some say he honored your innocence. In the rare moments you do see him, he's cordial. Occasionally your sister sends letters from the French court. One night you wake to a dream, someone calling your name. It's a strange thing, to be surrounded by people all day and still feel completely alone. By the time you turn 10, you start to notice that the world looks at you differently. You're still a child, yes, but no longer one they can ignore. You're becoming a symbol, a future, a vessel. Your tutors push you harder. The ladies in waiting speak to you with more formality. Some say he delayed out of decency. Others suggest political timing. Either way, you begin to understand your place. You are meant to be fertile ground for dynasties. Your body is already spoken for, as if your entire existence now pivots on whether you'll bear children, not today, of course, but soon enough. You've seen other girls your age married off across Europe. Some already pregnant by 13, sends a cold ripple down your spine. Of strategy. You watch how older women navigate the court, how they speak, how they flatter, how they never say exactly what they mean. You smile, you curtsy, you pretend not to understand what's being said around you. You mimic them, become a better listener, a better actor. And when foreign envoys visit, you're suddenly part of the presentation, dressed in your finest, seated next to the throne, silent but seen. That is, when you realize something vital. You no longer just a queen by name. You learn to laugh at jokes about your future children, even though you still sleep with a carved wooden doll. You sip watered wine at banquets and pretend not to hear the lewd things said when nobles drink too much. They always do. You're not sure what it is, marriage, power, obedience, clever girls who outwitted their captors. Cling to those tales, even when you know how few of them ended well. But the way she says it makes you feel like a horse being trained for someone else's carriage. You're praised for your poise, how well you smile, how quietly you sit. You've heard the word heir murmured more often lately. Historians still debate whether Edward planned for you to become a mother early, or if he intended to wait until you were older. It's an odd kind of growing up. But deep down, something hardens. You start thinking in terms of survival. One day a noble woman lets slip, she'll grow into it. You take solace in your studies. Books become a refuge. Stories of queens who ruled in their own right. Saints who endured suffering with grace. The long game begins now, but you do. You understand everything. You're 12 now, and the palace seems quieter. but the silence is heavier, laced with secrets. Behind every thick curtain, behind every carved door, there's a conversation you're not meant to hear. You've become very good at overhearing them anyway. There's always something. A noble stripped of land. A new alliance being whispered into shape. A scandal delicately wrapped in metaphor. You've learned to keep your face calm no matter what your ears catch. Smile at breakfast, even if you heard your name whispered after midnight. You've been grown tall enough now that the servants stop mistaking you for one of the younger pages. A nod from you at a banquet can make a noble breathe easier. A frown can ripple through a chamber like thunder. You're starting to matter in subtle ways, not because of power, but because of potential. You memorize the rhythms of court, who rises early, who sneaks out late, who always seems to know too much. And through it all, your name gets tossed in like garnish. The French girl, the silent queen, little Margaret. It's never your majesty when they think you're not listening. But not tall enough to be taken seriously in council. Not yet. You glide through the court like a ghost in silk, soaking up stories in 4 languages, never quite belonging to any one of them. One day you catch a conversation not meant for you 2 knights talking over their cups. She is cleverer than they think. One day she'll bite. You don't know whether to feel proud or afraid. Rumors swirl constantly. Edward is ill. Edward is plotting war. Edward is reconciling with Scotland. Edward's mistress is pregnant. Historians still argue about just how much you knew, how involved you were in court intrigue. Some say you were an innocent figurehead, cloistered and protected. Others argue you had eyes in every corner of the court, quietly collecting influence like candle wax gathering at the base of a flame. Either way, you begin to speak less, but what you say matters more. At night you dream of being older, just a little older, old enough that they'll finally let you speak in council, old enough to ride without a chaperone, old enough that your signature will count. But you're not there yet. You're still learning which faces to trust and which are masks. And through it all, you keep your hands folded neatly in your lap, your eyes lowered just enough, and your ears open. Because in a palace full of whispers, knowledge is the only real armor you have. You're 13 now, and it's strange how your title Queen of England feels both heavier and hollower than ever. The palace still bows when you enter a room, the servants still curtsy, but the sparkle is gone. You've stopped trying to impress anyone, you just exist. Edward is older now, visibly tired, his once imposing stride slower, his attention divided between ruling, aging, and managing the endless chessboard of his realm. And you're a shadow walking alongside him, still too young to rule, too watched to rebel, too valuable to forget, but increasingly too inconvenient to remember. But they don't know your laugh. They don't know how your feet ache from standing through mass, or how you once cut your finger on a goblet and had to hide the blood so no one would panic. You had no children. You memorize the names of visiting nobles, even when they don't bother remembering yours. You kiss the air beside their cheeks and bless their daughters' engagements. No court faction of your own, no role in governance. It's just a name, a face, a crown that never really fit. You're polished. Yes, but you're starting to feel invisible. Your days blur. Prayers, embroidery, lessons, banquets. Others suggest you quietly maintained a network of correspondences, writing letters, steering favors, smoothing tensions between France and England. Maybe both are true. Or neither. You sit at royal functions, perfectly still, like a portrait come to life. You smile politely as he reads your name, Margaret, by the grace of God, Queen of England, Lady of Ireland and Duchess of Aquitaine, and realize you recognize none of the words that follow. You didn't write them. You didn't even know they existed. And that's the thing you feel like a painting. Beautiful, maybe. Revered, occasionally, but lifeless. Court artists paint you in gold-threaded gowns with swan-like necks and lips like rosebuds. Historians still argue whether you had any agency in these years. Some think you were sheltered in the Queen's apartments, protected from politics. What is certain is that you were increasingly isolated. One day, you ask a clerk to read you one of your own official proclamations. You're living history, yes, but it's being written around you, without you. And yet, you endure. You show up. You play your part. You hold court with grace. Because that's what a queen does, even when she's little more than a ghost in her own reign. The news comes quietly, like so much else in your life. King Edward is dead. You're barely 14. They don't let you cry in public, of course. Queens don't sob. They mourn with dignity. But behind closed doors, it's different. The man you were married to since you were 6, the one who barely knew you and yet defined your life, is gone. People murmur respectfully. Some even mean it. But you can feel it already. They're shifting around you, repositioning, making space for the new queen, the next alliance, the future. And with him goes your title, your place, and what little routine you had. You're not the Queen of England anymore. It's just a dowager, a widow, a teenaged royal relic. You walk the corridors you once ruled and watch as servants repaint, reassign, and repurpose. Your tapestries are replaced, your symbols removed from banners. You tell her yes, and she curtsies so deeply you fear she might fall over. Or if she ever was. Later, you find her staring at one of your portraits in the hallway, tilting her head, as if trying to see past the paint into something real. There's even a theory that you returned to France for a time, though no one agrees for certain. You slip between records like a whisper, important but not central, visible but not focused on. Even your personal priest is reassigned. At the funeral, you walk behind the casket in black, your veil heavy enough to hide your face but not your thoughts. Edward's son takes the throne, Edward II. He's only a few years younger than your own brother, and he barely looks at you. You are, after all, a leftover piece from the last regime, still French, still childless, still an awkward reminder that kings sometimes make peculiar choices. You're given a residence, some income, and a small household, enough to live, not enough to matter. Some reply. Most don't. Historians still debate how you were treated in widowhood. Some argue you were left to fade in comfort. Others say you were exiled by indifference. You try writing letters to old allies. Once a young maid asks if you were really a queen. Sometimes you stare at those portraits too, wondering if that girl with the crown and the long neck and the blank eyes is still you. You were married at 6, widowed at 14, and now, what are you? A question history never fully answers. Years pass, and your name fades from court gossip, from official chronicles, from the whispers in the corridors. You live quietly, mostly forgotten by a kingdom that once called you queen. Your portraits are mislabeled, your letters misplaced or destroyed. Your story becomes a footnote, a side comment in the saga of kings and wars. Yet the question remains, who were you really? Pawn in a political marriage? A victim of circumstance? Or perhaps something more, a survivor, navigating a world that expected little from a child bride, but demanded everything? Others suggest you quietly influenced court decisions, maintained fragile peace between England and France, and survived brutal politics with grace few could match. Historians still debate your legacy. Some call you the forgotten queen, a ghost lost in the shadow of more famous figures. Your life is a study in contrasts, crowned but powerless, seen but invisible, young yet burdened with ancient responsibilities. You wore the crown before you could understand it, married a man who barely knew you, and lived in a palace that never truly felt like home. You understood that sometimes survival itself is the greatest triumph. But you endured. You learned the language of silence and the power of patience. As you look back, you see a girl forced into history's margins, but one who never stopped moving forward, even when the path was dark and uncertain. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Slow now. Let your breath soften as the palace walls grow distant, the heavy silks and cold stones fading like a dream slipping through your fingers. You've walked these shadowed halls with a girl's footsteps long ago, a child crowned too soon. You don't have to be anything but still. Imagine the flicker of candlelight, the faint scent of lavender drifting on a gentle breeze. You carry her story forward in the pauses between breaths, in the spaces where memory dwells, and the slow pulse of history's heartbeat beneath your skin. Remember Hertha, tiny queen, the quiet survivor, wrapped not in jewels, but in the resilience that only silence can forge. The world outside moves fast, full of noise and fury, but here in this quiet moment, time stretches like soft velvet. Sleep well, knowing that even the smallest queens leave traces in the fabric of time. No matter how forgotten she was, the girl with the heavy crown carried a light, fragile, flickering, but unextinguished. That light is yours now. So let your eyes close gently. Let the quiet wrap around you like a warm shawl. Sweet dreams.